Okay, let's unpack this. Take a moment to think about your daily life. How often do you find yourself telling someone about something that happened?
Oh, constantly.
Right. Maybe you're sharing a funny moment from your day or recounting a tricky situation at work.
Or just listening to a friend do the same thing. It's not just like formal presentations or, writing a novel.
No, exactly.
It's baked into everyday chats.
It really is. Storytelling isn't some grand art form reserved for novelists or screenwriters. It's woven like really deeply into our daily conversations. It's fundamental to how we interact.
Absolutely. It's our primary tool for sharing experiences, building connection, making sense of our world, and, well, communicating it to others.
And that everyday fundamental role is exactly why this deep dive is so relevant to you, especially if you're navigating communication in English.
Right. Because every single time you talk about something that happened before now, whether it was 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, you're telling a story.
You're recounting an experience.
And being able to do that effectively, clearly, and engagingly in English, that's essential for real-world communication. It's not just about listing facts, is it?
No, not at all. It's about bringing an experience to life for someone else, sharing it.
Making it relatable.
But, diving into the material we have for this deep dive, it's clear that telling stories smoothly and clearly in English presents some very specific hurdles for learners.
Mm-hmm.
The sources we've been looking at really pinpoint a few major challenges people face. One is that feeling of ideas or events feeling disjointed, like they're jumping around without a clear flow.
Yeah, the lack of flow. That's something the sources return to again and again. It's like trying to build something complicated, maybe assembling a piece of flat pack furniture.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right. But the instructions are missing or they're just confusing and the pieces are in a random pile. You have all the components, all the events or details, but you don't know how they fit together or in what order.
So the listener just can't see the connections.
Exactly. It makes it really hard for them to form a coherent picture in their head.
That analogy from the sources about building something with random pieces or missing instructions, it really resonates. It's hard work for the listener when the structure isn't clear. It's exhausting.
It is.
And another challenge that comes up repeatedly in this material, and it's a big one, is difficulty with verb tenses.
Oh, yes. Tenses. Specifically, choosing and using the correct past tenses consistently when recounting events. This is a major source of confusion for listeners because, well, tense usage tells them about the timeline, doesn't it?
Totally. If the tenses aren't quite right or they jump around, it can make the sequence of events really unclear.
Mm-hmm. You might intend to say one thing happened before another or that something was ongoing while a key event occurred.
Right, like setting the scene.
But if the tenses get tangled up, the listener can just get lost in the chronology. They're left trying to figure out, okay, wait, did that happen before or after the main event? Is this finished or was it happening for a while?
It adds a layer of mental work for them just to follow the simple timeline of your experience.
Yeah.
They're trying to be historians instead of just listening.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of detail, which the sources highlight with, I think, great insight. Sometimes with the best intentions, wanting to be thorough or share everything they remember, storytellers include too many small, perhaps irrelevant details.
Right. You think you're helping, but
But instead of adding clarity, it just overwhelms the listener, makes them lose the main point.
it's the opposite problem from not enough information, maybe, but the effect on the listener is similar confusion and, well, disengagement. They just zone out.
Yeah, they do.
The sources use an analogy here, too, which I found really helpful. Imagine trying to find one specific person in a really crowded photograph.
Okay.
But the person showing you the photo insists on describing every single face in detail in the background first. See that guy in the hat, and the woman with the dog, and the pattern on the wallpaper.
You get completely lost.
Totally. You get completely distracted by all the noise and can't easily locate the subject of interest. Your brain is just overloaded with irrelevant visual data.
That's a perfect illustration of detail overload. You just drown the main point. So our mission in this deep dive today is to directly address these challenges: the disjointed flow, the tricky tenses, the detail overload, using the practical insights drawn right from the source material you've provided.
Exactly. We're going to unpack these resources to give you a clear, actionable roadmap for telling your stories in English more effectively. We'll show you how to build a simple, solid structure that acts as your blueprint.
like the frame of the house.
Yeah, and we'll introduce specific natural-sounding phrases, the verbal signposts, as the sources call them, that help guide your listeners smoothly along the path.
We'll also look at strategies, straight from the sources, for adding just the right amount of color, details, and emotions without, overwhelming people. Finding that sweet spot.
And crucially, we'll dive into the advice the sources offer on handling verb tenses to keep that timeline clear and easy to follow.
Plus, we'll touch on the fascinating cultural context of storytelling in English, which I think sheds a lot of light on why native speakers approach it the way they do. It's not always just about information transfer.
Right. So by the time we wrap up our conversation today, the goal is for you, our listener, to feel significantly more equipped and hopefully confident the next time you want to share an experience in English. You'll have practical tools and insights right from this source material to make your stories clear, engaging, and genuinely enjoyable for others to listen to, moving you from maybe hesitant to empowered.
That sounds like a deep dive truly worth taking.
Yeah.
Let's jump right in and begin building this essential skill.
Okay.
And according to the source material, the absolute foundation, the very first step, lies in structure.
Yeah, what stands out immediately from these sources is how consistently they identify the lack of structure as the root cause of so much confusion in storytelling.
It really is the starting point for clarity.
When you jump unpredictably between different parts of an event, or you introduce characters or information long after they were relevant, or maybe just start right in the middle of the action without setting the scene.
Yeah, launching right in.
You force the listener's brain to work overtime.
It's cognitively exhausting for them. Their mental energy is spent trying to assemble the pieces, build a framework, and figure out the order of events instead of simply absorbing and enjoying the story itself.
They're doing the work you should have done before speaking.
Pretty much. The sources are very clear on this. Make it easy for the listener to follow. Don't make them work so hard just to understand the basic sequence.
It's like trying to follow a map where the main points are marked, maybe the start and the end, but the roads connecting them are all jumbled up or missing pieces.
Yeah, or the map's folded wrong.
Right. You know where you start, you know where you're trying to go, but the path between is illogical, confusing, and just frustrating. You want to give up.
Right. But here's the wonderfully simple, really effective solution the resources point to. They cut through the potential complexity and state that, at its core, a good story, any story, needs just 3 fundamental parts.
3 parts. Okay, I'm listening. Nice and simple.
The beginning, the middle, and the end.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
They emphasize this is a universal, almost intuitive framework. It mirrors how we naturally process pretty much anything. Something starts, something happens, something concludes. It feels right.
And the sources really stress starting with this simplicity. It's not about, advanced narrative techniques or literary flourishes, especially when you're learning.
Not at all. That stuff can come later, maybe.
Yeah.
That's secondary. The most powerful initial step, according to this material, is simply internalizing this core 3-part model. Use it as a mental organizer before you start speaking.
So actively think. What belongs in the beginning? What's the core event in the middle? How does it wrap up at the end? Pre-planning, even just mentally.
Exactly. And they give really compelling reasons why this simple structure is so crucial, both for the storyteller and the listener. For the storyteller, they say it acts like a mental filter.
A mental filter? How so?
Well, when you know your goal for the first part is just to set the scene, for the middle to describe the main event, and for the end to provide closure, it helps you manage the flow of information. It makes it easier to decide what details are essential right now versus what can wait, or maybe even be left out entirely.
So it helps you avoid those tangents, those side roads that don't really lead anywhere important for this story.
Precisely. It keeps you focused on the narrative arc. It prevents you from getting lost in the maze of your own memories and all the little side details that pop into your head as you're speaking. You have that clear path to stay on.
It gives you guardrails, keeps you on track.
It gives you guardrails, absolutely. And for the listener, this simple structure is like having a crystal clear map handed to them. They instinctively know where they are in the story at any given moment. They can mentally check off, okay, this is the setup. Right now we're getting to the main action.
Yeah.
Okay, they're wrapping it up now.
That significantly reduces the listener's cognitive load, doesn't it? They aren't constantly guessing or trying to assemble the pieces in their head.
Precisely. They aren't spending precious mental energy trying to figure out the order or the relevance of the information you're giving them. They can relax and just listen, just absorb the story, because the structure is reliably guiding them.
And this directly prevents that feeling of confusion or effort the sources described earlier. The story unfolds predictably, logically, and understandably.
Yes. So that fundamental takeaway, the first big point from the sources, is the power of the simple beginning, middle, end structure. It's the essential skeleton, the absolute foundation for clarity in any story you tell.
The skeleton, I like that. Get the bones right first.
It truly is the bedrock. Get this simple framework right in your head, and you've solved a huge part of the clarity problem highlighted in the sources. Okay, so with that overall structure in mind, that BME skeleton, let's delve deeper into each specific part, building the story piece by piece, just as the material guides us.
Right. Let's start right at the beginning then. The very first piece of the puzzle. The B.
The beginning. The sources consistently label this as setting the scene. And its main job, its absolute priority, is to quickly orient your listener, get them grounded.
So give them the context they need before you get to the juicy part.
Exactly. You need to give them the critical background information before the main action kicks off. Otherwise, if you jump straight into the interesting bit, the listener is forced to play catch-up.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out who you're talking about, where you were, when this happened, all while you're already describing the peak of the action. It's too much at once.
Exactly. The sources use the analogy of providing coordinates on a map. You need to tell the listener who is involved, where is this happening, when did it take place, and what was the general situation or what were you doing right at the start? Just the basics.
Okay.
Answering these questions up front immediately places the listener into the context. They have the essential facts to anchor the rest of the narrative. They know the playing field.
The material we have is very specific here, isn't it? Listing those 4 key questions the beginning should ideally answer to efficiently set the scene.
Right. Let's recap those. They are: who's involved, where is it happening, when did it take place, and what was generally happening at the start, the initial state.
And they provide a fantastic, concise example sentence that manages to answer all 4 questions in just one natural-sounding statement. It's a perfect micro-example of effective scene setting from the sources.
Yeah, it's really neat. That sentence is, last weekend I was at a coffee shop with my friend and we were just chatting about work.
Okay, let's break that down using the sources analysis because it's so efficient. It really shows how much you can pack in.
Okay. Last weekend, boom. That immediately tells us when the story happened. The listener has a clear time frame, not vague, specific.
Got it. When?
I and my friend. That tells us who is involved. We know the key people right at the start. No surprises later.
Check.
At a coffee shop. That's the setting. It gives the listener a specific location to visualize where.
Where? Makes sense.
And we were just chatting about work. That tells us what was generally happening at the beginning. It establishes the initial, relatively calm, normal situation before the main event disrupts it. The baseline.
What? Okay. When, who, where, what. All in one sentence.
See how much context is packed into just one simple sentence. The listener is instantly grounded. They know the time, the people, the place, and the initial activity. They have those essential map coordinates. They're ready.
And the sources are really clear. Getting this basic info out at the very beginning is crucial because it prevents that immediate confusion we talked about.
Absolutely.
If you had just started with, say, a strange person walked over and gave us something, the listener's brain would immediately race with questions. Wait, where were you? Who's us? Who was this person? When did this even happen?
Right. All that mental energy is spent on basic orientation, just trying to figure out the scene instead of listening to the actual story event you want to share.
So by providing the scene-setting information up front, you allow the listener to just relax. Their foundation is set. They are ready to fully receive and understand the story as it unfolds. No mental juggling required.
Exactly. It sets expectations, lets them visualize the scene. It's like loading the background image on a computer screen before the main characters appear and start doing things.
That's a good way to put it. Let's think about a couple more examples from the sources just to really nail this principle for a story about something that happened at work.
Okay, maybe something like, yesterday morning I was sitting at my desk, just trying to finish that big report before the deadline.
Okay, let's break that down too. When?
Yesterday morning.
Who?
Or at my desk.
What initial activity?
Trying to finish that report.
Yeah.
The normal work state.
Perfect. All the key context is there, nice and concise. Or maybe a personal story, like something from traveling.
How about a few years ago, my sister and I were backpacking through Italy, and we were looking for our hostel again, completely lost as usual.
Okay, when?
A few years ago.
Ooh.
My sister and I.
Where?
Backpacking through Italy, specifically looking for the hostile.
Initial activity.
Looking for the hostile, being lost, sets up maybe a funny or frustrating situation.
Yeah.
The principle is consistent across different types of stories. Orient the listener quickly and efficiently right at the start. Give them the who, where, when, and what.
Got it. So the beginning is all about setting the scene effectively, laying that foundation. Once the stage is set, we naturally move into the heart of the story, the middle.
The middle, the
Yeah.
M in BME. The source material defines this as the part where something interesting happens.
Right.
It's the main event, the incident, the turning point. Basically, the thing that makes this particular story worth telling in the first place. This is where the problem crops up, where the unexpected occurs, where the core action unfolds.
The sources call it the exciting part, but they clarify, don't they, that exciting doesn't just mean like action movie thrilling.
No, not necessarily. It just means noteworthy, significant within the context of this story.
Yeah.
It's the thing that disrupts the initial situation you just set up in the beginning, the thing that changes the status quo.
Okay, so it's the reason you decided to share this experience, the core of it.
Exactly. So, continuing with our coffee shop example from the sources, after setting the scene, last weekend I was at a coffee shop with my friend and we were just chatting about work. The middle introduces the main disruptive event.
Okay, what was it?
Suddenly the waiter walked over and gave us a free dessert. We were so surprised because we hadn't ordered it.
Okay, that's the disruption. The calm routine of chatting is broken by this unexpected action, the waiter appearing with unordered food.
Right. And notice the word suddenly. The sources highlight this type of word as a powerful verbal signpost.
A signal word.
Yes, signaling to the listener that the main event, the turning point, is happening now. Things are changing abruptly from the initial state. It makes the unexpected feel just as sudden to the listener as it probably did to you in the moment.
Yeah, words like suddenly, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they create that jolt.
They do. And then adding the immediate reaction, we were so surprised because we hadn't ordered it, that does two things. It conveys your emotion surprise, which helps the listener connect.
Right, it helps them feel it, too.
And it also explains why this is noteworthy. It wasn't a planned event. It was unexpected, hence the surprise. It justifies telling the story.
Makes sense. So this middle section is absolutely vital. It is the plot, essentially.
It is the plot. It's the core conflict, the surprising incident, the key action, the body of your narrative. It's the sequence of events that moves the story from the established beginning to whatever comes next.
Without the middle, you just have a setup and maybe a conclusion, but no actual narrative connecting them. The listener knows where you were and how it finished, perhaps, but not what actually happened in between to create the story.
It's the engine driving the narrative forward. It's the meat on the bones of that BME skeleton we talked about. It's the reason you bothered to start the story.
Okay, so the middle is the main event, the disruption, the action. And once that main event, that central action, has occurred and played out, the story needs to find its resolution. It needs to wrap up.
Which brings us neatly to the end, the E of BME. The sources state the purpose of the end is to provide closure, resolution.
Okay.
It tells the listener what happened as a result of the middle event, how the situation ultimately concluded, and brings the story to a, hopefully, satisfying finish. Ties up the loose ends.
Okay, so picking up our coffee shop story one last time, what was the ending provided in the source material? How did that free dessert situation resolve?
The ending given is, it turned out that the dessert was for another table, but the waiter told us to keep it. It was such a nice surprise.
And that provides clear resolution to the unexpected arrival of the dessert in the middle, doesn't it? It answers the question that was hanging in the air.
Yes, exactly. It turned out that the dessert was for another table. That explains why the unexpected thing happened. It resolves the mystery for the listener. The reason for the surprise is revealed.
The confusion is cleared up. Okay.
Precisely. But the waiter told us to keep it. That provides the final outcome, the clear resolution of the situation. You got to keep the free dessert.
The practical result.
Yes. And it was such a nice surprise that summarizes the overall feeling about the outcome, reinforcing the positive conclusion to the experience, wraps it up emotionally.
Why is having a clear ending like that so important according to the sources? Why not just stop after saying the waiter let you keep it?
Because without a clear concluding statement or summary, the story can feel unfinished. It might just trail off awkwardly.
Yeah, leaving the listener hanging, thinking, okay, oh, and is that it? What's the point?
Right. A good ending provides that essential sense of completion. It gives the final takeaway message or feeling, leaves a clear impression, and makes the whole narrative feel whole and satisfying. Like the final chord in a piece of music resolves the tension.
Okay, so to recap that essential structure from the source guidance. Beginning, set the scene clearly. Who, where, when, what. Middle, describe the main action, the disruption, the interesting event that happened. End, finish with a clear resolution, outcome, or final feeling.
That simple three-part structure is just incredibly powerful for bringing clarity to your stories. It's the blueprint you build everything else on. Get that right, and you're halfway there.
Right. That structure gives us the skeleton, the essential framework for clarity. But let's be honest, just having the bones isn't always the most engaging thing, is it?
No, a skeleton isn't very lively.
Exactly. To make stories lively, engaging, and sound like natural conversation, not like a report,
Yeah.
we need to add some flavor with language. We need to flush it out.
Absolutely. And the sources are great on this, highlighting specific types of natural expressions that act like verbal signposts.
Ah, yes. Those phrases native speakers use almost instinctively, often without thinking, to guide the listener smoothly through the narrative path, like little road signs for the ear.
Precisely. Once you have that basic BME structure in mind, consciously weaving in these types of phrases makes your story flow much better, helps hold the listener's attention, and crucially, makes your English sound much more conversational, less like you're just reciting facts from memory.
Okay, so let's look at the different types of phrases the sources highlight. Starting the story. How do you grab the listener and signal that a story is coming?
Right, the opening phrases. Their purpose is often to create immediate intrigue or set a specific tone. They function like explicit invitations to listen.
Get their attention.
Yeah. The sources list examples like, "You won't believe what happened to me."
Ooh, that one immediately creates curiosity, doesn't it? You have to ask, what happened?
Exactly. It generates that instant "what" reaction. Or a simpler, more interactive one. Guess what?
Yeah, that pulls the listener in directly, makes them participate almost.
Or maybe when to set a tone right away. So the funniest thing happened the other day.
That tells you up front, okay, prepare to laugh, or at least this is intended as a humor story. Sets expectations.
Right. Using phrases like these makes your opening sound spontaneous, conversational, engaging. They signal, hey, lean in, I've got something interesting or funny or weird to share. They prepare the listener to receive a narrative, not just dry information.
Okay, so you've hooked them with a good opening phrase. You've set the scene clearly using the beginning structure. Now you're in the middle, describing the main action, the surprising event. How do you use language to add drama here, signal that something significant is happening, and keep them invested in that core part?
This is where another set of phrases, highlighted in the sources, comes in really handy. These are phrases specifically for building suspense or signaling a key action, a moment where things shift or something unexpected happens, the turning points.
Okay, like what kinds of phrases are we talking about here?
Well, things like all of a sudden or out of nowhere, they have a very similar abrupt feel.
Yeah, they inject that feeling of suddenness right into the narrative, mirroring the event itself.
They absolutely do. They make it feel just as sudden and impactful for the listener as it likely was for you. Great for highlighting those moments of abrupt change or surprise. Then there's the seemingly simple but incredibly useful "and then."
And then seems so basic, but I suppose it's crucial for keeping a clear sequence of actions, especially if several things happen quickly in the middle.
Incredibly useful, yeah. It clearly links one action to the next, maintaining a clear chronological flow within that middle section. Prevents the listener from getting confused about the order of events when multiple things are happening. Just keeps taking things along.
Simple but effective.
And another powerful one the sources mention is, "to my surprise."
Ah, that one's different. It's about your internal reaction.
Exactly. Yeah. It's powerful because you're explicitly stating your emotional reaction right in the narrative. You're letting the listener in on how that moment felt to you.
It helps the listener connect with your internal experience. Builds empathy, maybe?
I think so, yeah. It helps them understand the emotional significance of the event for you. So using these kinds of phrases strategically in the middle, the suddenness markers, the sequence connectors, the emotional reaction indicators, they disrupt any potential monotony and highlight those crucial turning points or actions, like putting a little flag on the important moments.
Like saying, pay attention now, this bit is important, but doing it naturally within the flow. They add dynamism.
Exactly. And they help the listener understand the significance of that particular action or moment within the overall story. Okay. So the main events have unfolded. You've used some signposts in the middle. Now you need to bring the story to a smooth, effective close. You can't just stop abruptly.
Right. You started with an invitation. Guess what? You need a clear signal that you're finishing. You need to provide that closure we talked about.
And avoid leaving the listener hanging.
Need phrases that clearly signal the end is coming. Maybe summarize the outcome or the overall feeling. Stop it from just fizzling out awkwardly.
And the source material provides specific, natural-sounding phrases for this closing function too. Simple but effective ones like, in the end.
Very clear signal. The listener knows, okay, we're reaching the conclusion now.
Or something like, and that's how it all happened.
Yeah.
Which feels very final and complete, like closing the book.
Yeah, that feels quite definitive.
Or maybe a phrase that summarizes the feeling or the main point of the story, like, it was such a crazy experience, or it was such a funny moment, or it was just a really nice surprise, like in our coffee shop example.
Right. You can swap out the adjective crazy, funny, weird, surprising, memorable, lovely, whatever fits the tone and outcome of your specific story. Summarizes the essence.
Using these ending phrases prevents the story from simply fizzling out, which the sources warn against. It avoids that awkward pause where the listener isn't sure if you're finished talking or if there's more coming.
Yeah, that silence can be uncomfortable.
It provides a clear, satisfying conclusion. The listener knows it's done. They understand the final result or the main feeling you want to leave them with.
So incorporating these specific expressions for starting, signaling key action or suspense in the middle, and then clearly ending really adds layers of naturalness and engagement. They are powerful tools that guide the listener through the narrative and make the whole experience much more dynamic and enjoyable to listen to.
They really are. They take that solid BME structure and make it sound like flowing, natural conversation, not just a recitation.
Okay, structure gives us clarity. These phrases add flow and signals. But what makes a story truly vivid, memorable, and relatable? What makes the listener feel like they were almost there?
Well, that's about adding color, emotions, and specific details so the listener can really see and feel what you experienced, bringing it to life.
Yeah. Moving beyond just stating the facts and the sequence, painting a picture.
Exactly. And the sources are very clear that adding specific details, sensory information, descriptive language, and conveying your emotions are crucial for this. It helps the listener visualize the scene, picture the people, and connect with how you felt. They really emphasize the value of this for making a story engaging and memorable.
But, and this is where the sources give a really critical warning, isn't it? A crucial point of balance.
Yes, this is so important. They strongly advocate for adding details, but explicitly say again and again, be careful, not too many details. Find the balance.
This point is so important because, as a learner especially, you might think more details are always better. More information equals more clarity, right?
Yeah.
Seems logical.
It does seem logical. You want to paint a complete picture, share everything you remember. But the sources explain that too many details, especially irrelevant ones, can actually have the opposite effect. It can backfire spectacularly.
How does it backfire? What happens?
It can make the story boring, just tedious to listen to. Or it can become overwhelming and confusing for the listener. They get lost in the weeds.
Going back to that analogy of finding someone in a crowded photo, if you describe every background person, every irrelevant object, the color of their shoes, the pattern on the curtains...
The listener gets completely bogged down. Their mental energy is spent processing all this extra information that isn't directly relevant to the main point of the story. It just becomes clutter.
They lose the main thread because their mental resources are tied up sifting through non-essential data. It's like trying to point out a single star in the night sky by describing every single grain of sand on the beach first.
Exactly. The listener is drowned in irrelevant information and loses sight of the important thing you're trying to share.
So the key insight here from the sources is not about including all the details you remember, but about carefully selecting the right ones.
The impactful ones. The details that serve the story, that help the listener's understanding or connection rather than hindering it. Quality over quantity.
And the source material provides a great contrast to illustrate this difference between too little detail, which is flat, and just enough impactful detail, which is vivid. They compare a simple statement. I saw a dog.
Okay. Minimal information. Factually correct, sure, but not very interesting or memorable. Doesn't paint much of a picture.
Right. Compare that with a richer description highlighted in the sources. I saw the cutest golden retriever running around the park.
Okay, let's break that down using the sources analysis again. Why is the second one so much more effective? What do those extra words do?
Well, first, cutest. That's not just an objective fact about the dog. It's subjective. It's emotional. It tells us how you, the storyteller, felt about the dog. It adds your personality and helps the listener connect with your feeling towards the dog.
Adds that personal touch immediately. You get a sense of the storyteller's reaction.
Right. Then golden retrievers, that's specific. It gives a much clearer visual image than just dog. Most people can picture that breed, or at least a type of friendly golden dog.
Much more vivid. You can almost see it.
And finally, running around the park, that adds action, context, setting. The dog isn't just standing there statically, it's moving, it's doing something, it's in a specific location. It puts the dog in the scene actively.
So those few carefully chosen additions, the feeling cutest, the specific type golden retriever, the action in place, running around the park, they make this story come alive, just as the sources say. They paint a picture for the listener.
Exactly. And they're impactful because they add visual richness, emotional context, and specific relevant action without adding unnecessary clutter. They let the listener visualize it vividly, connect with your experience, without getting lost in irrelevant facts like, I don't know, the color of the dog's collar, unless that's somehow crucial to the story, or the specific type of tree in the park.
It's about choosing details that serve the story and enhance the listener's mental image and connection. Be selective and purposeful with details.
Got it. And the sources highlight that conveying your feelings, your emotions, is just as crucial as adding those physical details for making a connection.
Absolutely. How you felt is a key part of the experience you're sharing. It's often the point of the story.
And the sources provide another great contrast here, comparing the simple factual statement, I was surprised.
Okay. Grammatically correct, communicates the basic idea, but a bit flat, maybe. Understated.
Yeah. Compare that with the more expressive description they suggest. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
Shocked feels immediately stronger than surprised, doesn't it? More intense.
Yeah.
It implies a greater level of astonishment or disbelief. Has more impact.
Yes. It indicates a higher degree of emotional reaction. And adding, I couldn't believe it, amplifies that feeling even more, showing the depth of your reaction. It wasn't just mild surprise, it was profound astonishment or disbelief. Really drives the point home.
The sources are clear.
Yeah.
Using these stronger, more precise words for emotions helps the listener feel what you felt, or at least understand the intensity more accurately.
Exactly. When you choose words that accurately reflect the intensity of your emotions, was it slight annoyance versus complete fury, mild happiness versus absolute ecstasy? You invite empathy from the listener. They can better relate to your experience because you're clearly communicating the emotional weight of it.
So, the key takeaway here is to be expressive with both details and emotions. Use descriptive language. Use stronger emotion words when appropriate. Really paint a picture with your words and feelings.
But always, always, as the sources keep reminding us, keep that balance in mind. Don't overdo it. Don't use overly dramatic language for something that was only mildly surprising, and don't bury the story in a mountain of tiny, irrelevant details.
Right. The goal, as the sources emphasize, is vivid, engaging communication that enhances connection, not overwhelming the listener with every single fleeting observation or minor feeling you had. Select the details and emotion words that have the most impact and move the story or the emotional connection forward.
Be expressive, be selective, be balanced. That seems to be the art of adding color effectively.
Okay, so we've built the skeleton with structure, added flow and signals with verbal signposts, and discussed how to add color and feeling with balanced details and emotions. But there's another crucial piece from the sources that helps tie this all together, especially for clarity, and that's handling the timeline accurately.
Ah, yes. We circled back to the challenge of verb tenses that we mentioned right at the beginning. The sources offer some really practical guidance on how to use tenses effectively to make sure the listener understands the chronology of your story, right?
Yes, this is absolutely vital. As the sources note, confusing tenses is like scrambling the dates on your map or getting the sequence wrong in your instructions. Even if all the points are there, the journey doesn't make sense. Their key insight is that consistent use of a few core past tenses is usually your best friend here. You don't need to be a grammar wizard using every tense imaginable.
Keep it simple and consistent. Okay, what specific guidance do the sources offer on tenses in storytelling? Which ones should we focus on?
They really emphasize using the past simple for the main sequence of events. This is the workhorse tense for narrative action. He walked in, he sat down, he said something. The steps of the story.
Okay, past simple for the main action steps. What else?
For things that were already happening or providing background context before or during the main event, they point to the past continuous, the wasser plus ing form.
Okay, so past simple for the steps in the journey, the actions that move it forward, and past continuous for the scenery or what was happening in the background while the journey was underway.
That's a great way to put it, exactly. Let's go back to our coffee shop example and see how the sources use this. The beginning set the scene. Last weekend I was at a coffee shop with my friend, and we were just chatting about work.
Okay, so was at, past simple, tells us your location, a state of being at that time, and we're just chatting, past continuous, tells us what was happening at that time, the ongoing background activity.
Precisely. It sets the scene and tells us what was already in progress when the story began. It paints the backdrop. Then, the middle introduced the main event. Suddenly, the waiter walked over and gave us a free dessert. We were so surprised.
Right. Walked over and gave are both past simple. These are the key actions, the steps in the main event sequence that disrupt the background chatting.
Right. They're the disruptive actions that happen in the story. And we're surprised is also past simple, the verb to be in the past, describing your state, your reaction to that action at that specific moment.
So the main actions and reactions in the middle are typically past simple.
Okay. Yes, and the end resolved it. It turned out that the dessert was for another table, but the waiter told us to keep it. It was such a nice surprise.
Turned out, told, and the final was for the state feeling are all past and simple again. These are the actions and states that complete the story, the final steps leading to the resolution.
Exactly. The sources illustrate how sticking to this fairly simple pattern, using past continuous for the ongoing background at the start or during the story, and past simple for the sequence of actions and reactions that make up the main plot in the middle and end, provides a very clear, natural timeline for the listener.
It signals clearly, this was the situation, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Much easier to follow than mixing tenses randomly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like using the past continuous to draw the static background setting, and then using the past simple to draw the figures moving within that setting, step by step by step.
That's a really helpful analogy. It helps the listener distinguish easily between what was already in progress,
Oh.
the background context, and the key events that move the story forward.
And another point the sources make, which is useful, is about occasionally using the past perfect, had plus past participle, if you need to refer to something that happened even before the main sequence of past simple events in your story began.
Okay, so an event that happened before the story's time frame even started, but is relevant context for understanding the story itself.
Exactly. For
Yeah.
example, if our coffee shop story was different, maybe about you receiving an unexpectedly huge bill, you might say something in the middle like, the waiter walked over, past simple, and gave us the bill. We were shocked, past simple, because we'd only ordered past perfect 2 coffees an hour earlier.
Ah, okay. Had only ordered past perfect clearly shows that the action of ordering happened before the main story event of the waiter giving you the bill. Past simple. It sets up why you were shocked by the bill.
Precisely. It places that earlier action clearly before the main narrative timeline. But the sources emphasize you don't need lots and lots of complex tenses. For most everyday storytelling, consistent use of past simple for the main events and past continuous for background, with maybe an occasional past perfect for something that happened earlier, is what provides that clear, easy-to-follow timeline.
The key word there seems to be consistent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jumping between tenses without a clear reason is what confuses the listener and makes the timeline muddy. Stick to the pattern.
That's incredibly practical advice, directly addressing that key challenge of tense confusion. Focus on past simple for the action sequence, past continuous for the ongoing background. Keep it consistent.
It provides the listener with a correct chronological map to follow your story easily without getting lost or having to backtrack.
Yep.
Removes a major hurdle.
Okay, that's really solid. So structure gives us the blueprint, phrases give us flow and signals, balance details and emotions add vividness and connection, and now we have practical advice on tenses to keep the timeline clear. But storytelling isn't just technique, is it? It's also deeply cultural.
Yes, and the source material brings up some fascinating insights here about how storytelling functions specifically in English-speaking contexts, which is vital for understanding not just how stories are told, but often why they're told that way. It's not universal.
Right. What did the sources highlight about this cultural dimension? What's different or notable?
Well, they emphasize that in many English-speaking cultures, specifically mentioning American and British examples, though it likely applies more broadly too, storytelling is a really significant, almost expected, part of daily social interaction.
It's not just for special occasions.
Not at all. People share anecdotes, little stories about their day or past experiences all the time, in casual conversation with friends, family, even colleagues. It's seen as a core way people connect, build rapport, and importantly, entertain each other.
Okay, entertain. That one came up before.
Yes, and this leads to a crucial nuance about the purpose of a lot of this casual, everyday storytelling, highlighted by the sources. It's often not primarily about conveying facts with maximum efficiency or reporting exactly what happened in a dry, objective, purely informational manner.
So if it's not just about the facts, what is it primarily about then in these contexts?
Significantly, maybe even primarily, it's about entertainment. It's about engagement.
Entertainment. Okay, that's a key cultural insight. That shifts the focus, doesn't it? From pure factual accuracy to engaging the listener, making the story interesting, perhaps making them laugh, holding their attention.
It really does. While the core facts generally need to be true, the main goal in many casual situations is often to make the listener enjoy hearing the story. And this focus on entertainment helps explain some common practices that might seem counterintuitive if you come from a culture where factual precision in everyday talk is always the highest priority.
Like the point the sources made about people sometimes choosing to exaggerate a little, particularly, they noted, in American examples, specifically when telling funny stories.
Yes, exactly. And the sources are very clear about the motivation here. It isn't intended to lie or deceive the listener about the core event. It's done specifically to make the story sound funnier or maybe more dramatic or more interesting, and therefore more entertaining for the audience.
So because the cultural value is placed so highly on the story's entertainment factor in these casual contexts,
A small, harmless embellishment that ramps up the humor or the drama is often just accepted, even expected sometimes, by native speakers, especially among friends. It's kind of understood as part of the performance of telling a good, engaging story.
so you're not changing the core event. Yes, the waiter gave you a free dessert. Yes, you saw a cute dog, but perhaps you make your reaction sound slightly bigger or more comical than it really was for comedic effect. Or maybe you describe a minor detail in a slightly more dramatic way to build tension or humor.
Precisely. It's about crafting the narrative for maximum enjoyment and impact on the listener, not just reporting facts like a news anchor. It's about making the story better as a shared experience, enhancing the punchline or the surprise without fundamentally altering the truth of what happened. A little artistic license for the sake of connection and fun.
That makes sense in the context of entertainment being a primary goal. Another huge way stories are made, engaging in these cultures, also highlighted by the sources, is through nonverbal communication, right? It's not just the words.
Oh, absolutely, using your body and voice. The sources explicitly mention people using gestures and voice changes frequently when telling stories in casual conversation. It's an integral part of the communication package, not just an optional extra.
Yeah, and they give great examples like maybe whispering to build suspense when you get to a secret or surprising part.
Which literally makes the listener lean in, doesn't it? It creates a feeling of intimacy, secrecy, or drama just through the volume change. Or, conversely, raising your voice for excitement or surprise.
Yeah, helps the listener feel the intensity you felt in that moment. You convey the emotion not just through the words you choose, but through the energy and tone of your delivery.
These nonverbals add such powerful layers of meaning and engagement. A strategic pause just before the punchline to build anticipation, using hand gestures to indicate size or movement, the fish was this big, making facial expressions to show how you felt, shock, amusement, fear. They all contribute significantly to making the story more engaging and, as the sources put it, often just more fun to listen to.
They convey energy and emotion on a physical, auditory level. It's really an integral part of the storytelling performance in these contexts, especially in casual, face-to-face conversation.
So, understanding this cultural dimension that casual storytelling is common and expected, that it often prioritizes entertainment alongside information, that it might involve humor or slight exaggeration for effect, and that it relies heavily on nonverbal cues like gestures and voice modulation gives you crucial insight. It helps explain why native English speakers often tell stories the way they do, and why the techniques we've discussed, like using signpost words, adding emotion, maybe even that slight embellishment, are so effective in English communication.
It helps you understand the unwritten rules of the game, so to speak, in this kind of social interaction. You know what's expected and valued.
Exactly. It helps you decode and participate more effectively.
This has been incredibly insightful. Seriously. We've covered the essential blueprint, the BME structure. We've looked at the flow agents, those verbal signposts. We've discussed adding color and connection through balanced details and emotions. We've tackled the timeline management with consistent tense usage. And now we've layered on the cultural stage it all plays out on. Wow.
It's quite a comprehensive picture when you put it all together.
So what does this mean for actually doing it, for putting all this into practice? How do you take all this great theory from the sources and start using it effectively to tell your own stories? That's the big question, right?
Right, because theory is essential for understanding, but active practice is how you actually build the skill and make it your own. And the source material is excellent here because it doesn't just stop at the theory. It offers a very practical, step-by-step path forward. It breaks down the challenge into simple, actionable steps.
Okay, good. Practical steps are what we need. How do the sources suggest we start? What's step one in their practical plan?
Step one, the sources suggest, is simply to choose a story. Pick a short personal experience you'd like to share. And to make it easier initially, they recommend selecting something that naturally lends itself to that simple beginning, middle, end structure.
So something with a clear start, a distinct main event, and a definite conclusion. Don't pick something super complex or rambling for your first practice run.
Exactly. The sources suggest maybe something funny, surprising, or interesting that happened recently, as these often have a very clear middle event, the punchline, the surprise that drives the narrative naturally. Keep it manageable at first.
Got it. Find a simple recent story with a clear BME potential. Step two.
Step two is to actively apply the structure. Once you have your story in mind, plan it out. You can do this mentally, or maybe quickly jot down bullet points for each of the three parts. Think, what absolutely needs to go in the beginning? Who, where, when, what initially? What is the core sequence of events in the middle? How does it conclude or resolve in the end?
So consciously map it to the BME framework.
Yes. And then, practice telling the story out loud, focusing explicitly on following that BME structure. Make sure you hit those key points in the right order. Just focus on the flow first.
Okay. Structure it out, then practice telling it, focusing purely on that three-part flow first. Get the skeleton solid. And step three.
Step three is to consciously try to weave in some of those storytelling expressions we talked about earlier, the verbal signposts. Don't feel like you need to stuff every single one into one short story. That would sound unnatural.
Right. Don't overdo it.
But deliberately pick a few to start integrating. Maybe choose one phrase to open the story you won't believe. Or, so the other day. Pick one or two for the middle to signal key moments or reactions, all of a sudden, and then, to my surprise. And choose one to clearly signal the end. In the end, it was the goal is to try and include at least 2 or 3 of these deliberately as you practice telling the story.
So the sequence is: choose a simple story, structure it mentally or with notes using BME, then consciously sprinkle in a few key signpost phrases as you tell it, focusing on hitting those BME points and using the phrases naturally.
Exactly. It's a layered approach. Structure first, then add the flow phrases.
How does the material suggest we actually practice this? What are the best ways to actually do it and get better?
The sources offer several great practical suggestions for practice. One is simply telling the story to yourself out loud.
Just talking to the walls.
Yeah. It sounds simple, maybe a bit weird, but it's hugely beneficial. Just hearing yourself say the words helps you feel the flow, or identify where the structure might be wobbly, or where transitions feel awkward, or where you stumble over words.
Yeah, you become your own first audience. That really helps you spot where you're jumping around or where you need to work on your phrasing to make it smoother, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It helps you identify the weak points in your structure or language before you try it on someone else. Another suggestion from the sources. Record yourself on your phone and listen back.
Ooh, the dreaded recording.
I know, nobody likes hearing their own voice, right?
Yeah.
But it can be incredibly revealing for improvement. You'll hear exactly how the story sounds to a listener, which moments land well, which parts drag, where you sound hesitant. You can check if you're speaking too fast or too slow, if your signpost words sound natural, if the ending feels complete.
It's tough medicine, but so valuable for identifying specific areas to work on.
It really is. Another option the sources mention: write the story down. Actually write it out using the BME structure and consciously trying to include the signpost phrases and maybe some well-chosen descriptive details or emotion words.
How does writing help with speaking?
Well, writing forces you to think more deliberately about word choice, sentence structure, and overall organization. It slows down the process and makes you more conscious of the elements we've discussed. Then you can try telling the story based on your written version. And then, perhaps the best case scenario, if possible, share your story with a real person.
Taking it live.
Yeah. Tell it to a language partner, a tutor, or even just a patient friend who understands you're practicing. Getting feedback from a real listener is invaluable. They can tell you honestly where they got confused, what parts were engaging, what details they liked, or if the ending felt satisfying.
The key here, overarching all these methods, seems to be active practice. Just reading about structure or memorizing lists of phrases isn't enough, is it?
Not at all. You have to actively do it. You have to tell stories repeatedly. This is how you build that muscle memory, both in your brain for organizing the thoughts and in your mouth for producing the language smoothly.
It's like learning a musical instrument or a sport. You have to practice the movements.
Exactly. Each story you tell, every time you consciously practice applying the structure, integrating the phrases, experimenting with adding just the right amount of detail and emotion, you refine the skill. It gets easier, faster, and more natural the more intentional practice you put in.
So practice is everything. Start small with simple stories, focus on getting the BME structure solid first, then layer in the language tools like signpost phrases, and gradually work on refining the color, the details, the emotions, and maybe even the delivery and tenses. It's a process, but a very achievable one with deliberate, focused practice.
Yes, and the sources really underscore that message of gradual improvement through consistent application. Don't expect perfection overnight. Just aim for progress with each attempt.
This has been a really comprehensive deep dive, hasn't it, into what feels like such a fundamental skill for everyday English communication, just sharing experiences.
It really has. We've taken those key insights straight from the source material and hopefully provided a practical, actionable guide for you, the listener, to work with.
We really emphasize the need for that simple, clear three-part structure, beginning, middle, end, as the absolute foundation for clarity, how it acts as a blueprint to prevent confusion for both the speaker and the listener.
hmm And we've shown how specific storytelling phrases, those verbal signposts, act like dynamic guides, leading the listener smoothly through your narrative and making your story more engaging and naturally conversational.
And we've explored the critical art of adding color and feeling with well-chosen details and emotions, always remembering that crucial balance the sources warned about, aiming to captivate with vividness, but not overwhelm with unnecessary clutter, finding that sweet spot.
We also tackled the often tricky challenge of managing the timeline by focusing on the source's clear guidance for using past simple for the main sequence and past continuous for background, showing how consistent tense use is absolutely key for chronological clarity.
And finally, adding that crucial cultural context, understanding that in many English-speaking settings, casual storytelling is frequent, often aims for entertainment and connection, may involve accepted, slight exaggeration for humor or effect, and relies significantly on nonverbal expression alongside the words.
Putting all these elements together, all drawn directly from the source material we reviewed, provides you with a really powerful toolkit, I think.
Yeah, it directly helps overcome those common issues we started with, the disjointed ideas, the tense confusion, the detail overload, and hopefully helps you feel much more comfortable and effective the next time you want to share one of your experiences in English.
And just to leave you with a final thought, perhaps, building on that cultural piece we discussed, we touched briefly on the American and British approaches mentioned in the sources, particularly regarding entertainment and slight exaggeration. Now, maybe take a moment to reflect on this. How does storytelling typically work in your native language or your home culture?
Oh, that's a fascinating point for comparison. Are there differences in the expected structure? Is a strict BME always followed, or are other structures common?
Yeah, or is there more or less emphasis placed on expressing emotion openly or on adding humor? Is exaggeration for effect common and accepted, or is strict factual accuracy always prioritized, even in casual stories? What about nonverbal communication?
Thinking about those contrasts, how storytelling works back home versus the patterns we've discussed for English based on these sources, that could give you really deep insights, couldn't it?
I think so. It can highlight the specific nuances of English storytelling and communication styles. It helps you see what might be different from what you're intuitively used to. And that awareness helps you consciously adapt your approach when speaking English. What stands out to you when you compare them? That's a great question for reflection.
That comparison is incredibly illuminating. It adds another layer to understanding communication across cultures and helps you see why these specific English techniques highlighted in the sources are so effective and, well, expected in this particular context.
Definitely. And the source material also hints, doesn't it, that mastering these fundamental structure, clarity, flow, balance, detail, appropriate tenses is really the essential stepping stone. Once you have this foundation, you can then think about sounding even more natural.
Right. Things like refining your delivery, your intonation, and rhythm. Incorporating more idiomatic language naturally. Learning more subtly from observing native speakers.
Exactly. Those seem like logical next steps, perhaps for a future deep dive, once you feel comfortable with the core elements we've covered today. There's always more to explore and refine in language learning.
Always. But for now, the message from the sources is clear, isn't it?
Yes.
All
Keep
right.
talking, keep practicing these techniques deliberately, tell your stories, and importantly, try to enjoy the process of learning and connecting through sharing your experiences in English.
Great advice. Until next time.